You may think the animals were very stupid not to see at once that Uncle Andrew was the same kind of creature as the two children and the cabbie. But you must remember that the animals knew nothing about clothes. They thought that Polly's frock and Diggory's Norfolk suit and the cabbie's bowler hat were as much part of them as their own fur and feathers. They wouldn't have known even that those three were all the same kind if they hadn't spoken to them, and if Strawberry had not seemed to think so. And Uncle Andrew was a great deal taller than the children and a good deal thinner than the cabbie. He was all in black except for his white waistcoat, not that it was very white by now, and the great grey mop of his hair, now very wild indeed, didn't look to them like anything they'd seen in the three other humans. So it was only natural that they should be puzzled. Worst of all, he didn't seem to be able to talk. He had tried to. When the bulldog spoke to him, or, as he thought, first snarled and then growled at him, he held out his shaking hand and gasped, "Good doggy, then, poor old fellow." But the beasts couldn't understand him any more than he could understand them. They didn't hear any words, only a vague sizzling noise. Perhaps it was just as well they didn't, for no dog that I ever knew, least of all a talking dog of Narnia, likes being called a good doggy, then, any more than you would like being called my little man. Then Uncle Andrew dropped down in a dead faint. "There," said the warthog, "it's only a tree. I always thought so." Remember, they hadn't yet seen a faint or even a fall. The bulldog, who'd been sniffing Uncle Andrew all over, raised its head and said, "It's an animal, certainly an animal, and probably the same kind as those other ones." "I don't see that," said one of the bears. "An animal wouldn't just roll over like that. We're animals, and we don't roll over. We stand up like this." He rose to his hind legs and took a step backwards, tripped over a low branch and fell flat on his back. "The third joke, the third joke, the third joke," said the jackdaw in great excitement. "I still think it's a kind of tree," said the warthog. "If it's a tree," said the other bear, "there might be a bee's nest in it." "I'm sure it's not a tree," said the badger. "I had a sort of an idea it was trying to speak before it toppled over." "That was only the wind in its branches," said the warthog. "You surely don't mean," said the jackdaw to the badger, "that you think it's a talking animal? It didn't say any words." "And yet, you know," said the elephant, the she-elephant, of course. Her husband, as you remember, had been called away by Aslan. "And yet, you know, it might be an animal of some kind. Mightn't the whitish lump at the end of it, this end, be a sort of a face? And couldn't those holes be eyes and a mouth? No nose, of course, but then one mustn't be narrow-minded. Very few of us have what could be called exactly a nose." And she squinted down the length of her own trunk with pardonable pride. "I object to that remark very strongly," said the bulldog. "The elephant's quite right," said the tapir. "I'll tell you what," said the donkey brightly. "Perhaps it's an animal that thinks it can talk but can't." "Can it be made to stand up?" said the elephant, thoughtfully. She took the limp form of Uncle Andrew gently in her trunk and set him up, on end, upside down, unfortunately, so that 2 half-sovereigns, 3 half-crowns and a sixpence fell out of his pocket. But it was no use. Uncle Andrew merely collapsed again. "There," said several voices. "It isn't an animal at all. It's not alive." "I tell you, it is an animal," said the bulldog. "Smell it for yourself." "Smelling isn't everything," said the elephant. "Why," said the bulldog, "if a fellow can't trust his nose, what is he to trust?" "Well, his brains, perhaps," she replied mildly. "I object to that remark very strongly," said the bulldog. "Well, we must do something about it," said the elephant, because it may be the Neville, and it must be shown to Aslan. What do most of us think? Is it an animal or something of the tree kind? Tree, tree, said a dozen voices. Very well, said the elephant. Then if it's a tree, it wants to be planted. We must dig a hole. The two moles settled that part of the business pretty quickly. There was some dispute as to which way up Uncle Andrew ought to be put into the hole, and he had a very narrow escape from being put in head foremost. Several animals said that his legs must be his branches, and therefore the grey fluffy thing, they meant his head, must be his root. But then others said that the forked end of him was much muddier, and it spread out more, as roots ought to do. So finally he was planted the right way up, and when they'd patted down the earth, it came above his knees. It looks dreadfully withered, said the donkey. Of course it wants some watering, said the elephant. I think I might say, meaning no offence to anyone present, that perhaps for that sort of work, my kind of nose... I object to that remark very strongly, said the bulldog. But the elephant walked quietly to the river, filled her trunk with water, and came back to attend to Uncle Andrew. The sagacious animal went on doing this till gallons of water had been squirted over him, and water was running out of the skirts of his frock coat as if he'd been for a bath with all his clothes on. In the end, it revived him. He woke from his faint, and what a wakening it was. But we must leave him to think over his wicked deed, if he was likely to do anything so sensible, and turn to more important things. Strawberry trotted on with Diggory on his back till the noise of the other animals died away. And now the little group of Aslan and his chosen counsellors was quite close. Diggory knew that he couldn't possibly break in on so solemn a meeting, but there was no need to do so. At a word from Aslan, the he-elephant, the ravens, and all the rest of them drew aside. Diggory slipped off the horse and found himself face to face with Aslan. And Aslan was bigger and more beautiful and more brightly golden and more terrible than he'd thought. He dared not look into his great eyes.